Wake up! I need you to be focused.
Don't let anyone tell you that shit.
To me, it's like the equivalent of taking a 5-hour energy shot. But it literally becomes like a raging like wildfire where I'm like, boom!
Hearing your passion and enthusiasm, that's like a whole different level.
I am learning that I am on the right path.
It's the lens through which you see the world. It is the filter through which every experience you have ever had since birth has been through.
The key to building a successful team is to having a team with diverse strengths that all offset each other's weaknesses.
If we just follow what we love, we're gonna end up where we want.
Like some of the stuff you said, I'm like, oh my god, yeah, that's a really good way to think about it.
Did you see that movie that just came out about how the laundry was clean every day? Did you see that movie? Fuck no, you didn't see, because there's never been one.
I mean, that's a good label too. I like that.
Yeah.
No, I'm not neurodiverse. I'm just fucking awesome.
I have been kicking a lot of ass this month.
Exactly.
Finding different ways that we can give our own gifts out into the world, I think, is one of the most important things.
Knowing that you have ADHD is not surviving with ADHD or the world. You can thrive.
Oh, hell yeah.
I'm very proud of what I'm capable of, and I'm learning to be compassionate about the days when I'm not.
I would never exchange the good bits of ADHD to get rid of the deficit.
And we're very creative and we can solve problems and see the world in a really different light.
If I can leave one message to my ADHDers, don't give up.
Like, it feels so good to talk to you about the fucking awesome stuff. Like,
right. Oh, god damn it, Lauren, yes.
I am there with them, and I am able to close out everything else and focus on them.
This is like one totally surreal experience.
You want that to touch other people's lives in a meaningful way.
That's all I want. And that is the ADHD passion side of it that really fucking matters. Welcome to Lobow's Spark. Hello there again, and welcome to Season 5 of Lobow's Spark, the Wildfire Intensifies. This season is going to dive deeper into ADHD, and we will be doing this as a team. I will have a group of fellow neurodivergents alongside me to discuss a specific ADHD topic that one of them has a great interest in. Today's topic is the ADHD Tax, and it was chosen by Dorsey. People with ADHD are a team, and teammates will disagree. We all have strong opinions, and each of us has a very unique style in which we present them. But in my opinion, this is what makes us so strong. We have strong opinions because we care so much about this topic, and caring matters. So we will start this series on the discussion of the ADHD tax. Let the ADHD wildfire intensify. Basically, Dorsey was the first one to email me with a topic or idea that is near and dear to her heart regarding ADHD. So I'm going to turn the floor over to her and let her explain why this is so important, and we will all go from there. Sound good?
Cool. I'm excited. I got so pumped writing this. All right. It's a bit long, but it sets us up, I think, for a really good discussion.
Yeah.
When you have ADHD and are medicated, not only are you paying for monthly doctors and medication or copays, you're also likely spending additional money on specialty items or services that help you to operate at your highest ability every day. Additionally, because of the high comorbidity rate with other mental health disorders, you're likely paying more than you should be if ADHD preventative medication and treatment was easily accessible to all. And I'll address that word preventative in just a minute. So what's the ADHD tax? Separately of all the costs of treatments, it's the price you pay for costly mistakes made due to the symptoms of ADHD. Paying this tax is an ugly reality for us all. Some obvious examples are parking and traffic tickets, late fees, forgotten subscriptions, low credit scores, all the money lost to impulse shopping or bad money management skills, the returns unmade, possibly due to anxiety or body dysmorphia, the dead houseplants or food thrown out or spoiled because we've forgotten about them. And let's not forget about all the medication we've forgotten to take. But those are only the most common examples. The hidden ADHD tax can be much higher and cannot be measured simply in dollars. It's the misused time, the deterioration of physical well-being, mental health, personal freedom, i.e. incarceration, and yes, years of your life. People with ADHD have a lifespan that's up to 20 years shorter than people who don't. So on top of everything that I mentioned, now add the costs of emergency room visits, addictions, diabetes, weight gain, sleep loss related costs, immune system deterioration, countless other mental health conditions. The last estimate I heard on the percentage of worldwide population with ADHD had the number at 15%. So I ask you all, how is this not a health crisis? If preventative medication and education were made readily available to all, imagine how much the costs of ADHD would be reduced. Also, the tax. Lastly, let me clarify my use of the word preventative with medication. While medication helps us manage these areas of our lives better, in itself, it does not mitigate the ADHD tax, though proper management may prevent the development of those associated comorbid conditions and accidents. Thank you.
Very well done, Dorsey. Thank you so much.
Oh, by the way, just so you all know, like, I want to be in advocacy one day and work towards legislation that like helps everybody with universal health care.
Okay.
Excellent.
That's why I'm so excited.
Okay, so why is this such a problem? As Dorsey pointed out, anybody is free to jump in. Why is it a problem?
I guess as I've just joined, I'll start. I think it's a lack of societal acceptance for the difference that we experience, and that, you know, that we there is little tolerance for the way we are. It's perceived to be very negative, when in fact it's not at all. They just keep trying to shoehorn us into a neurotypical matrix. It's not even a neurotypical matrix, it's a capitalist patriarchal matrix, but that's maybe a discussion for another time. And I think if we were just given the flexibility we need and allowed to live the way we need to, and in a way that we can thrive, we wouldn't experience this anywhere near as much. And with the right healthcare as well, of course.
I also think another added complexity is the invisibleness of the disorder.
Yeah, you're right. I would agree with that.
I think that's a really good point, though, about the negative stigma behind it, because like the first example I could think of when you were speaking is apps and subscriptions. It's everywhere. Every app has a subscription. How many people have signed up for apps and just forgotten about it and end up paying a year or letting the free trial run out? That kind of like business model is like everywhere in the kind of like tech industry. And if you ask like people with ADHD about it, they'll be like, yeah, it's not great for this and this reason, which we all kind of know. But if you ask people who kind of like maybe don't know about ADHD or don't care, maybe, they'll say, well, if you forget, it's your fault, and you know, it's just because you should have kept better track of it, and I never fall for those things. And you know, it's not really like seen as a discriminatory thing or like a medical thing
or a manipulation of human behavior.
It's seen as if you forget, then too bad for you. But then of course the subscriptions and the free trials combined with like our impulsivity like is just like a lethal combo, and tech companies know that. So for me, like, I know there's been some legislation being discussed about maybe not having it automatically renewed, but as far as I know, nothing's actually happened on it, so we'll see. But I don't even think it's being talked about in terms of ADHD. It's just being talked about in terms of like it's a predatory practice in general. But I think for us, it is much worse.
Add to that the loss of private data that we all so readily give up. And, you know, it's dangerous. In the future, it's going to be much more dangerous.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I agree. And I think with your statement there, what really stood out to me and what I feel generally is how much judgment there is preloaded into those reactions that we get. So for example, this week, because I'm 46, but I'm only recently diagnosed, even though I am an absolute classic combination ADHD case, scoring 9 out of 9 on each scale. So there's really nothing in the DRM that I'm not exhibiting. I was trying to explain to a friend who I haven't seen since before the pandemic, because she kept changing plans and it was really stressing me out. And so I was just trying to explain, I said, look, every time we make an arrangement, I set up 5 reminders over the week so that I don't forget. And it's really taxing for me to do this. It's a big effort. And then every time the reminder comes up, that's taking my time and my energy, and to store that. So if it keeps getting rescheduled, I just get really stressed out. And I also really don't like planning things too far in the future for the same reason. I think most of us exist much better in a time frame that's nearer to where we are now. And it's not that she didn't understand it, she was just so surprised. Her reaction was, oh, I just put it in my calendar and I know it's there. And I was like, I know, but that's not what works for me. And for me to be there on time, I also set alarm clock reminders from the night before when I'm in the 24-hour period. And I'll have 3 alarm clock reminders. So it is a big effort for me to fit into the neurotypical matrix. And I do it because I know it keeps everyone else happy, and that keeps my life less stressful overall.
You know, the judgment that we're talking about, that it's not that hard. Yes, I use my calendar. Yes, I use my bullet journal. Yes, I have alarms like Neil was talking about. And still, I can actually manage to forget something.
Yeah.
So I have to use those for the main things like medical appointments and stuff like that. If it's smaller and can be forgotten until tomorrow, I'm not going to make myself stress out about it. But oh my gosh, other people get me stressed because they think it's so easy. I'm not saying everyone. I have understanding friends and family, but oh my, society is not for us necessarily.
Think about preventative medicine. So for women, breast cancer screenings, I don't know, there's something for men along that too. But those things that people just don't think about and they plan, we have such a hard time with it unless we have it written down. We're not going to think about it.
Yeah, exactly. And like that exact thing happened to me recently. Loads of reminders, setting the alarm clock in the 24-hour period, totally on top of it. Got distracted by something half an hour before my appointment and realized the next day I never went to my smear. And it's like, oh God. And then I know I have to call the surgery again, deal with the judgment from the receptionist, because there's going to be a lot of judgment, even though they know I have ADHD. And I think this is a big problem. There is so much prejudice around ADHD, even people, and almost especially people in the medical world, are sometimes our harshest judges, and also the people close to us are our harshest judges. And it's those people who should be actually supporting us that cause us the most harm and pain. Not all of them, but we all have a few. I mean, I have a very supportive family. I'm very lucky, but you know, I see it a lot. Like I have ADHD friends whose families don't know they have ADHD, and they're the same age as me because they don't want to deal with it. All the reaction and the judgment and the prejudice, it's just easier for them to quietly live a diagnosed ADHD life, take their medication, try and fit in as well as possible. And that's just really sad, but it's really common. And that's a really big problem.
That is a big problem, a huge problem. You mentioned the talking to the receptionist, you know, when you have to call when you're an appointment. I used to be like that. I got over that real quick when I realized that I am paying them money to do that job. So I do not feel bad saying, by the way, I'll reschedule 15 times. It is your job to accommodate. So, I mean, that's their job.
Oh, I get that. It's just the snark, really.
You feel inside like it's, you're hurting their feelings or they're, they look at you as weird or whatever. It's their job.
And as well, we read about it a lot, and I definitely experience that a lot of these situations are very triggering because all of the years where I didn't know I had ADHD and I was just getting grief for my ADHD behaviors, and I internalized so much shame around that. Now, I think I'm really good with managing the shame, and I've reached a stage of really positive self-acceptance, which I'm really, really happy about. But there's still little bits in there, they're just waiting for a weekday, a day where you're tired or whatever. And then it's just like, oh, hello, remember me, I'm your ADHD shame. You've got to call the receptionist now. It's going to take your time. You're going to have to remember it. She's going to give you grief. And then I just won't call.
Yeah. Kirk, Grace, do y'all have anything to add to this? Leo as well.
I mostly just spent this time realizing how many things I've forgotten or missed over the last 2 months. I actually missed when I decided to go back to therapy this year for the first time in almost a decade. And I missed my first appointment because I set all these alarms and I set them all an hour after. And so I missed it completely. And this is one of those times where I thought I was like staring at my alarms and waiting for it. And once I realized I missed it was the worst part, because I'm like, oh, I've done this before. And I know what this is like. This is me not turning my homework in high school, 14 years ago, all over again. And just having to go through and set up my appointment. And then I actually missed, or it would have been hard, but I missed an opportunity to be on here again because I didn't check an email. And so it's mostly that I'm so used to feeling bad for missing those opportunities more than anything. Having to redo them isn't a lot of work, but having to go, oh man, I should feel bad because I forgot about this thing is the worst part by far. Dental appointments, all sorts of little things that I've had to reschedule, redo.
Pay fees on.
Late fees. This morning, I literally missed one bill for the first time in over a year. And I was just like, of course I did. So it's just those little things that's happening every day for all of us. I guarantee one of us is going, what did I forget? At least once a day. So I feel like I don't know if there's a good way for all of us to go, oh, it's fine, whatever, even if society won't, that's the hardest part. Even if we go, okay, whatever, I'm going to miss some things. I'm just going to have to reschedule, redo this or whatever. Some people might not be as forgiving. And the more we're out here and the more we're advocating and more there's someone going to bat, I think things will slowly turn in our favor, but it's us being confident enough to do that over and over and over again for ourselves first.
That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, and that's hard. It's weird. Every single person with ADHD has to learn that on their own sometimes.
Yep. Exactly. It goes back to what works for you. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's the social cost. Like, I never know quite when to cut in, so I'm always quite bad at it. But I was going to say, not to diminish the value of these things, but these are softer costs. When I was unmedicated and undertreated, I was in 7 accidents within 2 years. I almost cut my finger off numerous times in the kitchen from moving around too fast because of the hyperness, Those physical costs are so high. And then incarceration, you just think the color of your skin and ADHD will determine the rest of your life.
Yeah, those are huge. The especially before you're diagnosed, like I was just diagnosed. It's been almost a year now. Or actually, what month is it? I think it's been just over a year. So
happy anniversary.
Thank you. Yeah, it's completely changed my life. There were so many little things that were going on with my health that had happened for decades that I didn't get fixed until I was on medication and was finally able to like put all the puzzle pieces together and think about it. And now like suddenly all of these things that have been bothering my health that I thought was a huge deal are actually just a bunch of little things that I can totally handle. And I've actually been doing pretty good at handling. I just didn't realize it. But the stress levels that I put myself under, just thinking that I like had this autoimmune disorder that could, you know, shorten my lifespan, and like so many things, right? There's so many things physically, mentally. I thought that there were so many things wrong with me until I was able to be diagnosed. And of course, guess what was getting in the way of me getting diagnosed? My ADHD. Like getting to those appointments, finding a doctor, being patient enough to wait 6 to 9 months for your first appointment, and then remembering when that is. Like sometimes in some places, I know it's like 18 months. Somebody just said from the UK, it's like a 5-year process to get diagnosed for ADHD. That is absolutely insane. And then, you know, the whole goal is supposed to be that we're more closer to neurotypical, which is the big problem in all of this, right? Is that we're trying to help ourselves to be more like everybody else instead of figuring out what it is about us that makes what we can do really special, and letting all of those things that we're not good at all go, and figuring out other ways to handle that stuff.
And that's exactly why we're having these conversations and these discussions is to, I mean, because honestly, like every single time someone mentions something that is awesome, or this celebrity or amazing person, they all have the traits that we have. But if you have ADHD, they're looked down on. And that is what I cannot stand is, oh, you have to take the road less traveled unless you have ADHD. Then you should follow the normal path. Talk about a tax. That's a bullshit tax right there, in my opinion. But Leo, did you have something to chime in on that as well?
Oh, I mean, I think so. I think a lot of things have been said, which are just completely in line. Like I think, you know, first of all, there is like this predatory nature of like marketing and sales that preys on ADHD brains, and specifically undiagnosed ADHD brains. Like as I started like learning how like marketing and all that works, and seeing how companies will like intentionally set up processes that essentially act as ADHD traps, I think we really need to like stop those practices and make it more friendly in general, like to the consumer, not just ADHD consumers, but all consumers. And I think we are kind of moving toward that. Like I think that there's becoming a rise in companies that are you know, staying away from kind of those like deceptive marketing practices and those, you know, the trials that end up charging for, you know, annual subscriptions and things like that. So I think we are making progress, but I think if we can make a concerted effort to, you know, actually like push back against that and say like, look, this is completely predatory in nature. You know, the more we can push back, the faster that'll change. And then, yeah, just echoing what everyone's said on kind of the, you know, the overall like health costs and everything. Like I experienced, like, so I went through and like I was treated for a number of years for anxiety and depression, which is all really just because I was trying to not be ADHD and autistic at work. And so I didn't realize that, you know, I had, you know, I didn't struggle until I got into the workplace. Well, I mean, I struggled, but not, I didn't care as much until I got into the workplace, I guess, because all of a sudden it directly impacted my livelihood. And so to fit into that mold, like I had to make myself somebody I wasn't. And so that had a huge like impact on my health. Like I gained a ton of weight, and I was on all this medication that you know, like depression, anxiety medicine. And then I had medicine that like was just like, you know, to essentially keep me awake every day so I could go in and do my job. And looking back at it, I'm like, how was I even living like this? Like, I mean, I made it through, but until I realized that, like, no, it's like ADHD and autism, like, you know, I was letting kind of this system like dictate my life and all of that. And so, like, you know, I look back, I'm like, man, I lost like a decade of a career that I just like forced myself to kind of go along this path because I thought that I had to, right? I mean, that's what everybody was telling me. That's, so I think like that time tax can be absolutely huge. Like when you're not diagnosed, when you don't understand what's going on, it can really be incredibly like rough to make it through. So like I definitely think we need to you know, make sure that people are at least getting a chance to be diagnosed, or you know, I think the being an advocate and spreading this information is huge, so that people, you know, I haven't even managed to get that official diagnosis yet, because of course I realized this after I quit my job and was trying to do all things on my own and then didn't have insurance that would cover it. And so but just knowing has been hugely impactful for me, because at least now, like, yeah, I'm going to drop the ball sometimes. I'm going to do that. But now I know why. Like, it's not because I'm lazy. It's not because I'm scatterbrained. No, it's ADHD, and that's cool. Like, it's going to happen. And now I'm just much more accepting of that. And I don't necessarily care as much if other people aren't. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents there.
I'm very interested in mental health care, or mental health as a human right, and that movement, because I think that just hits the nail on the head so well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it is absolutely vital. It does seem that mental health is like an add-on to like normal healthcare. Like, you know, it's not this given that people get mental health care. It's like you have to have like a really good healthcare like plan to be able to do that, and that is absolutely right. I mean,
pre-existing condition, and what are you supposed to do? Sorry.
I agree with what y'all are saying. Do y'all think that there's a stigma with, like, for example, if someone gets diagnosed schizophrenic, everyone's going to take that seriously. Someone gets diagnosed with ADHD, no one's going to take that seriously.
Yeah.
Why is that?
The representation in the media is really shocking. The storylines around ADHD are really ableist and not accurate. And now my eyes are open to it. I just can't believe what I'm seeing. And that kind of influence, like I was watching a Netflix drama a while back, and there was this kid in it, and he was like, oh man, you were so there for me when I was taking my Adderall and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my God, that's not what Adderall does, what he's saying. You know, and this is just crazy. And now I'm living my life off the drugs. And I was just like, you know, and I'm sure you're all aware that Scientology has a long-running anti-ADHD campaign and anti-psychiatry campaign generally, but they plant stories. There's whole medical papers around this. And I think the problem is society-wide, and it just infects everything. I think with so many people speaking out now, it will change, and, you know, being very vocal. But before I forget, I just want to say I missed the first email as well. I missed the DM. I turned up an hour early for this meeting and then was late in the end. And I also missed my first therapy session and everything else that probably everyone else would say here. But I just wanted to mention another thing, is that today is World Suicide Prevention Day. And I'm sure we're all aware that it is a much higher incidence of attempted suicide in the ADHD community, 5 times higher. And that's very, very serious, and it's even higher in autism. My brother died by suicide, so that's something that I'm very passionate about, people understanding how serious it is to have ADHD that is untreated or unrecognized, you know, or that you can't accept because you don't know you have it. You know, when you have the tools and you have your ADHD community and you have the self-acceptance, you can get through the day a lot better when you don't have any of that stuff. And like, I was also diagnosed with anxiety and depression and God knows what else. And I had a whole load of autoimmune things that they were telling me I had, which I do have as well, it turns out. But I think this is like, I'm actually exactly a year since I started medication, because I got a medication reminder today that I have to get a review. So Yeah, and there's loads of comorbids as well. Like I'm a celiac, and it's very common for celiacs and ADHD to be overlapping because of shared genetics. So there's a lot that people don't understand. And as well, we all process medication differently. I'm an ultra rapid metabolizer, so I get 3 hours out of events. It's not very much. So I would like to see personalized medicine being brought in. I did it myself. I got a private analysis of my genome, which I'm still working through. And I now know that atomoxetine is a good choice for me. And it's not what I'm on, but I have my review now, so I can say that. I just think it's so complicated, and there's very little knowledge in the medical community here in the UK. And I'm from Ireland, and it's worse in Ireland, you know. And there needs to be urgently education about the fact that women with ADHD are more likely to self-harm, have eating disorders, have depression and anxiety, men too, you know. There's a whole lot of things that just aren't taken seriously, and instead they're treating the eating disorder, or trying to, without treating the actual ADHD. It's just not going to work.
So
I think that's a really good point. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Back to really the cost of undiagnosed. Like Grace was talking about it, and Nia was talking about it too. I am in that stage now. I've just started appointments, and they're talking to my parents, trying to get background information, not succeeding very well because memory 30 years ago, bad, right? And I'm in that, I'm aware, I've been aware for several months, and the awareness helps, but I have no help other than talking to my GP. I have no medication. I have no access to an actual diagnosis, and I'm hoping I can add yet in clamps, but I don't know. And that process, that cost of being in that process, especially because I'm lucky that I got appointments fast. But imagine those that, I think Grace was saying, some places they wait 18 months, and some places they actually have a whole process of from start to finish is 5 years. Imagine all the societal costs, basically, because here in Norway, if you were in an accident, you go to the hospital because you got hurt badly, the government is paying for that. So when we're talking about the big picture, there are costs. And if you're undiagnosed with ADHD, in Norway at least, so many people end up on disability. And because it's either untreated, or it's not treated well enough, or it's severe enough that even treated, they can't function in workplaces. But with adapted, what is it called? Accommodations. Thanks for the chat having that word in it. But with that, a lot of people could actually have less ADHD tax, right? Yeah, and they might be able to hold on at least a part-time job, right? But for me specifically, the cost is a lot of, I forget that I was cooking something, it burns. I forget my pretty expensive umbrella on the bus or at the bus stop, and it's not there when I come back, of course. And examples like that most of us have done more than a few times. I've thankfully not broken a cell phone, but that's just luck. And having a cover on my phone, flip cover. But you know,
if this was taken seriously as a national health, not international health crisis, and they put more emphasis on it in education, countries would save so much money, and the lives they would save would just be immense.
I was actually streaming for World Suicide Prevention Day today, fundraising for an organization working for mental health.
Well, thank you for doing that. It's really important. Thank you.
Yeah, I do it every year, though. Yeah. It's my third year doing it.
It's fantastic.
You gotta do something. Can't sit there and do nothing.
Right, exactly. Love it, blushing.
and I think it was Neve. I think it was Neve saying that we also have to talk about it. We have to be out there, talk about it, and I think also Kirk mentioned it too, that the more we talk about it, the more people who are willing to do it, the more it's out there, the more information is out there, the more chances people have to understand.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I wrote a newsletter about it today. I'll share the link after. It was one of those ones so I'm a writer, and so when the words come, it doesn't matter where I am. So it's predominantly written in a car park. I think awareness, destigmatization, but the most important thing, I get a lot of messages. I share a lot on social media and also my fairly new newsletter. The amount of messages I've got from both people I know and strangers who recognize themselves in what I say, and they tell me they're in tears, like they're in their 40s and 50s, and they're like, I had no idea, but they can't get appointments. You know, in Ireland, the waiting list for psychiatrists, you have to wait for the waiting list to open. And in the UK, well, in Devon, it's 8 years now. In London, it depends on what part of London you're in. I couldn't get seen in the public service. I had to go private in the end, but I just couldn't wait any longer. But like, I was able to gather the resources. I'm still feeling it a year later because it was very expensive because of my ultra rapid metabolizer status. But I think just, and as well, destigmatizing medication, you know, and explaining all of the issues around it, like, you know, that like mine doesn't last very long, but you know, it's still really helpful.
The actual pharmacology of what is happening with medication like Adderall in blocking the reuptake inhibitors of dopamine, people have no idea. No idea. And if they did, they would just think so much differently.
I think the trouble is a lot of people don't care. And the only way people care is when they can relate to it. So it's when someone they know or someone in their family, when they see the change in them. And yes. I think that's been the case for a lot of people who are close to me. I just feel like I did when I was younger. I had a really rough decade, you know. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I was like, what's wrong with me? I was undiagnosed celiac as well and other things, but I was in a pit of despair. Like, it was just so dark. And I think one good thing about ADHD is we never give up, but it's also exhausting. It's so exhausting. And just the last year being diagnosed, and I don't know, I started therapy as well, like separate to ADHD. It's not an ADHD therapy. And I think I was able to make all the changes I needed to make, as was discussed earlier. I wasn't in a place where I could do that before, because even just getting through the day and remembering to do my work or turn up to the meetings I was supposed to turn up to, I couldn't even manage that, you know? And of course, for women, we have hormonal implications, which are, yeah.
I feel like there's so many places I want to jump in right now. I have a partner who is spectacular. And I do not talk about them a lot because they like to remain as private as they can. But they had to go through a bunch of diagnoses like 2 years ago. And the amount of appointments that she had to go to was unfair for anyone to have to deal with. Pretty much every single week for a year had at least one appointment. And I cannot even begin to imagine trying to do that with ADHD. Yeah, a lot of us are in, like, I'm in a lucky spot. Like, I've been, I had very helpful parents. I had very supportive friends. I still have very supportive friends. I'm a white guy who grew up in middle class. Like, I have very few other things standing in my way. But I can't imagine having something else that ADHD would make exponential. Whether it's a completely different medical diagnosis. I can't imagine trying to go to the doctor 30 times a year. I'd forget 10 of them. Mm-hmm. I'd miss 10 of them.
Or different skin color.
Yeah. I cannot imagine being a person of color and trying to go through the processes that she went through with ADHD. I just can't. I can't.
Some people say that it's 75% of prison populations are ADHD right now.
That's terrifying. That's like, and I know what mistakes I've made, and I know I have a lot of privilege, and I know that I haven't suffered in a lot of ways because of that privilege. But if you stack one other thing on top of ADHD, suddenly I'm I'm one of those people.
But that's
you know,
a lot of
or,
the guilt thing too, don't you think, Kirk, that naturally comes with ADHD? Oh, I'm white. Oh, I had supportive parents. I should feel bad.
I think
you shouldn't feel
I
bad
think,
for what you have. I mean, that's not something that.
It's the curse of self-awareness, unfortunately.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
In some way.
But you shouldn't feel bad about that, though, Kirk, is what I'm saying. Like that is a guilt thing that ADHD is so good at. Is I don't go through as much as this person. I don't go through as much as that person. Okay. And I wish that Dave was here, because like all of his streams basically say it's all equal in importance when it comes to mental health. So don't feel bad about that. You just can't. I mean, like that's, you know, obviously do what you can to help if you feel the need to, but the guilt part of ADHD is something we have really got to take a look at, because that is just fucking bullshit.
But mentioning it here is the most important part, because we are all white here.
Right. Well, actually, Kat sent her apologies as.
I'm actually not white. I'm very brown, but it's hard to. I look white. So I understand, but I am brown.
Well, I mean, the bottom line is when you view somebody, when you're talking to them, they're not a white American, a black American. They're an American. They're not someone from the UK that's white or UK that's black. They're just someone from the UK. Like, it's got to be.
I live in Richmond, Virginia, by the way. I'm sure you all know what was just taken down and still controversial here. It's so
and I desperately do not want to get into politics on this. I want to keep it to the ADHD, but as long as we keep it to the people that have ADHD, regardless of race,
the traits that like that people think we're lazy, well, they just associate that with black people when they're racist. I also think,
well, that's just ridiculous.
But this is true. This is their experience. And here I've heard some horror stories. I think we as people of privilege within the ADHD community have a huge responsibility to make their worlds better by recognizing the difference.
Right.
We can't ignore it.
And but we've also got to reach out to them.
Absolutely.
And have discussion. This can get really politically charged when you're talking about that. I want to keep this to the ADHD, regardless of race, color, gender, everything.
I agree, but I would just I had to say what I said, because I
agree with you.
Life is politics, you know, where we exist in an oppressive society that we benefit from, and that's our reality, you know. So it's up to us to make the changes and sacrifice our privilege so that other people can live better lives.
I mean, I think Kirk said it really well, just to chip in. It's sort of things stacked on top of other things. So, like, I get what he's saying, because I'm like, you know, a quite, you know, well-off white person. I've had a lot of privilege as well. But it's like, there's also like, there's class issues. There's, if you were born into like you were in foster care, there's all other things that can just add on top. When I think of how hard it was for me to get diagnosed and how much money it cost, I know that's inaccessible to most people. Not even because of race. It's just inaccessible. I was only able to access it because I have all these privileges. And I think it's really important to recognize that, because it's something like my diagnosis is something that has changed my life for the better in so many ways. And the fact that it's that literally most people in our society right now are just completely locked out of that as an option, I think that's what sort of drives me. I think about how hard it was for me and how much harder it is for literally most other people. So that needs to change. That just needs to change. Like,
and to tack on to that, can you imagine the reduction in healthcare costs across the nation if these things were addressed, so that the number one killer, heart disease, which is linked to inflammation, and what causes an increase in inflammation? Stress and anxiety and, oh, hey, what's the word that? ADHD. So ADHD could be the number one killer of people. That's what I think. Anyways.
I actually agree. Dorsey, I strongly agree with that. Strongly agree that ADHD is at the core of
a lot of diseases.
A lot of
Yeah.
problems.
And
that-
especially the rise in autoimmune diseases. I think I was developing a mast cell disorder, and you said, Shannon, you were developing an autoimmune disease. I would imagine most of you have had something or thought there that you were at some point.
I'm diagnosed with 3 autoimmune diseases.
Yeah.
They are real, though, as proven.
Oh,
Some
mine
of it-
would have
some-
been
some of it
real.
is- yeah, some of it is genes, but some of it is actually worsened a whole lot by the stress in my body. It's not necessarily mental stress. It's the things that aren't helped yet.
Yeah.
I hope the word "yet" is actually going to be true. Knock on wood.
I think it pushes you towards something that is already in your genes, and the autoimmune response is
and
because
like when you were
of it.
saying, Kirk was saying about the layering one thing up on the other. I have ME, or chronic fatigue syndrome. The system thinks, well, can you come into an appointment, usually weekly? And then I have my pain clinic appointments, and then what if I'm going to see my GP? And then I all of a sudden have an appointment with someone every week. I can't do that. So I have
Right,
to
we
say,
were talking about that in the last stream, weren't we? About, you know, how to deal with the fact that they were asking you to come in once a week, and you felt like that was
so
just not a possibility.
I was in on the 3rd. I'm going in on the 13th. And then I'm going to have to tell them, you know what, I can't do the next week because I have another appointment that week.
And what would be the right accommodation there? Would it be video? Would it be someone coming to your house? Like
No.
what would be the solution?
The accommodation really is to wait longer in between appointments. Because there are no other accommodations in this case. They don't use video in this clinic. But it's basically me waiting 3 weeks in between 2 appointments, ideally. But if I have to do it after 2 weeks, well, I then will have to. Because I can go up to a pain clinic and to the ADHD testing appointments in 1 week. But I can't do a theory traffic test and the outpatient psych clinic in the same week, right? Because that's too much. But yeah, it's layering one challenge on top of the other to become a whole lot. It's not just for me, it's generally a lot of people are experiencing this, and especially if they're not yet diagnosed yet. But
So-
also if you're freshly diagnosed and you really haven't got the handle of things yet.
Because I was diagnosed when I was very young. I'm just sorry, I have to put this in there. And for my entire 20s and early 30s, I didn't know what the hell was going on. Much like Shannon, I was in with doctors all the time until they figured out that it was heading towards that. And all of these markers were there. But then when I started with a real ADHD therapist and had anxiety medication and had depression medication, everything started to reverse and my health got better.
So
This is
what
the thing
is?
about ADHD.
Oh, I'm
It's
sorry,
like-
Shannon.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, like, the thing about ADHD is it's like very well, it could be better research, but it is one of the disorders. I don't like to call it that, but
It's
and
number
one
one.
of the. But it's super well researched. It's super treatable. Obviously, not for everyone medication works, but for most people, it's
90%.
very treatable very easily. So the fact that it's so hard to access treatment for it, that makes no sense to me.
Or the stigma, even within the medical community.
Like just the effect that good treatment can have, and it's not even one of these cases where it's like treatment is expensive. It's medication. Like this could be afforded by the very wealthy countries we live in. But anyway.
Yeah, and that's not even taking into consideration the fact that like the process to get ADHD medication is about the least ADHD friendly process ever, because it's so controlled because of that stigma.
So bad.
I've been looking at like eventually trying to get on it at some point, but just like hearing all of these horror stories, like, okay, well, you have like this 12-hour window every month that you have to refill it in, like, or your script. Like I had a former prescription I had to get it like renewed every single month, and I could only do it within like 3 days of the next prescription, and it's such a nightmare to do that. Like why on earth would you ever do that? And then especially considering like what it's treating, like that's just cruel. Like it's so mean.
I literally would not be able to do that. I'm telling you that right now. Like, I luckily don't have to deal with that to get my medication. I can sort of
How do you get
request it when I remember, and then go to the pharmacy like anytime after it's there. And I've never had an issue, but I literally would not be able to do that because usually it's like
That's
I'll
incredible.
sort of request it from the doctor, and then it'll probably be like 2-3 weeks later by the time I pick it up.
And that's a privilege
That's
thing
amazing.
because it's probably where you're located and the type of care that's accessible, and that your doctor trusts you.
Or it could be insurance as well. Like some insurances just won't fill it. If you call in too early, that's usually the thing, is that they won't fill it until that happens, but they won't allow your doctor to give you refills. So they have to call every single month to, say that it's okay. It really just depends on where you are.
They forget to do that a lot too. They forget to call the wherever you pick up, the CVS or the whatever. And they
or for your doctor's on vacation, or if you have to go on vacation or anything like that, it's a completely different story.
Getting ADHD meds, I think, is one of the worst things, because
it involves so much.
Most people give up.
Yes.
And that's the biggest problem.
So many times
is that most people give up on the struggle to get the medication.
Mm-hmm.
And that sucks.
I'm very lucky, actually. One of my best parts of the last year in my ADHD treatment is fully unexpected, is my pharmacist. He's amazing. He's like a few minutes down the road. He's so understanding. So I've had a lot of dental problems as well, a lifetime of ADHD, and I had all these infections. So the people I have spoken to the most on the phone, no joke, are my dentist, receptionist, and also the pharmacist. I know them really well. And so he orders it for me every month. He has reminders set up on his computer. He orders it, and then he sends me a text to say, oh, it's here, like an automated text. And then I remember within a few days, usually. I put it on my to-do list straight away, ignore my to-do list, look at it again, forget. The cycle goes on and on.
Oh, yeah.
But he does that for me. He does that for me. And I said to him, I was like, how amazing this is.
You're very lucky.
Small town pharmacist.
Just a local family pharmacy. Like if I was going to one of the big chains, it wouldn't happen. Yeah. But he just really cares. He's just a caring person in the right profession, and I'm really lucky that he's down the road from me.
Mm-hmm. To be fair, I think it just depends where you are, like on the individual pharmacist. Because I just go to Boots, which is like owned by CVS, but it's the biggest one in the UK, and they're great. Like the system, I explained, it takes me a little bit, but I literally just like tap it in on my phone and order it, and then they text me, and then I go. Like it is not that bad. But it really, I've heard horror stories.
Well, it's technology too. It's the affordability of the technology that you use. So is it an app, I imagine? Yeah. So not everybody can afford a smartphone.
I wish there was an app, but I have to physically walk the script, in, and then have them look at me and be like, "You're on that much?" I'm like,
"Oh,
they're so judgy."
Yeah, no, it's the pharmacists are difficult. So I think I
was trying to say something like 5 times. This is
I'm sorry.
ADHD conversation. I'm just going to break in.
I love
probably
it.
6 times. But
love it.
When it comes to the systems that are set up, I'm in Norway, and I'm hearing a lot of horror stories, and I'm also going, yep, heard this before. That's why I've been nodding a lot. But here, it's not at all like that. It's more like Shannon was talking about, like, you know that you're going to run out in 3 weeks. Okay, you contact the pharmacy either by phone, or actually if you're there anyway, you can tell them, I'm going to run out in this long. And then they're going to make sure that you have it by at least several days before. You have a rule, you're not allowed to pick up more than 3 months of any medication. And if you're in the beginning stages of treatment on ADHD meds, you're not allowed to pick up more than like 1 box of that dose or something, because you're in the testing stages, right? But when you're on a dose and you're supposed to be on that one, you are allowed to pick up for 90 days.
Wow.
And then, and then you are allowed to pick
You
up.
can do that
not
here mail order.
What?
You can do that here mail order if you mail order from an insurance company.
Okay, so I'm not sure about mail and the ADHD type meds because they're actually controlled, and we have a very strict system in Norway
Yeah, we have to
for
show ID.
anything that is controlled. But you will need to go into the pharmacy, or if I was unable to go anywhere, I could have a letter registered with my specific pharmacy, not all the ones in the area, but one. And then my partner would bring my passport and have to have this letter registered in the pharmacy so that he could pick it up for me, but nobody else could.
It all comes down to what systems, strategies you have in place and what kind of advocacy skills you have. This is one reason I've become a coach, is because I've learned these and I want other people to learn. They're not hard. They're not hard at all.
Yeah.
Well, right, but also keep in mind that everybody's so different that
oh yeah,
your strategy should just be a strategy for them to find theirs.
That is the strategy of coaching.
Right, exactly.
But also, just to mention, in the UK, it's very highly regulated. We can only get our medication every 28 days. Only we can pick it up. And that's it. And it has to be in person. I do believe you can order stuff online, but I'm not sure. Like, they're so strict. And my pharmacist was on holiday, and there was a different pharmacist there. And she wouldn't give me my medication without ID. And I was like, I've been picking it up here for a year. And then all the staff recognized me, and they were like, oh, yeah, she's in here all the time. So, but yeah, it's every 28 days strictly. So if I want to go home to Ireland, I can't go for longer than 28 days now.
And you're gonna go sell it to kids.
Is that so? Because I actually like have on my to-do list to call my GP because I'm going back to Canada for 2 months from the UK. And I was like, what do I do?
With traveling with medication, you can get in real trouble. If you take Adderall to Japan, you'll get arrested.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I have heard
That's
that.
absolutely right.
I think Canada's fine with it, to be fair.
That's part of tax, ADHD tax.
Right.
You
Sorry,
can't,
that
you
is
can't-
true.
You can't go certain places in the world because you're not allowed to bring that medication that will help you function. So
Most
do you
countries
go?
do have a way to get around that, by the way.
What?
Most countries do have a way to get around that if you go through the state departments and you
which
apply
again
all
is
the stuff.
planning bureaucracy
Lots
in
of planning.
advance,
You
which
have to have
we are
that.
great at.
Right, that we're never going to do.
Yeah.
Like those things. So there's a lot of tax. We got that. I mean, we know. What do we do about it?
So I have an idea about this, actually. Been waiting for the time because it's something that's been pulled out of a lot of different conversations and something that I've just been trying to focus on in general. I am in marketing and I do like copywriting for other people, and I've always had a really bad taste in my mouth for a lot of different kinds of marketing, and I could never really understand what it was or why it was until recently when I found this woman, Rachel B. Turner on Instagram, and she does trauma-informed marketing. And this really encompasses like so many things and so many issues, and would actually protect a lot of the things that we're talking about being worried about. How they lock onto our pain points very specifically. It's a old marketing tactic, right?
Yeah.
This is your pain point. We're going to show you your pain point. Look how ugly it is. Okay. Now our thing is going to fix it because you don't want to look like this, right? But instead of using that ugly tactic, we're saying, look how wonderful your life could be because there are other things that can help you get to this place where you want to be. Instead of using all of these negative terms and shaming people, we're telling them that, using things that make them feel uplifted and see betterness in their life. And when we're talking about, how to, it's pretty easy that we could say, that this is a mental health thing, that people need to care more about healthcare. But bottom line is money for all of these corporations, for the people that have all the power, right? And they obviously don't care about those things. Marketing is something that they care about, though. And so I feel like if we're all kind of, especially people who are in spaces teaching others about these kinds of things, able to say, we're not going to use those pain points because we think that it's not safe. Because of these things, we're going to use these tactics, and be a little more upfront about the reasons that we're using the language that we're using. Maybe it will start to trickle out and maybe change that part of society, which might be a core part of changing the bigger picture of it.
Maybe advocating within marketing associations and pushing for change there as a way to bring more change to the world.
And connecting to the marketing people in those organizations. I mean, I don't like to pursue things from a negative angle unless it's entirely necessary, but I do think there's maybe a case for pulling out big organizations and shaming their campaigns who are using these abusive tactics, because they are abusive and they're harmful, and sharing that within the community. We have a lot of power together, you know. I mean, every one person has a lot of power, but together we have a lot more. And just to open people's eyes up, because I didn't know any of this, and I'm so happy you mentioned it. I would actually love to see that Instagram account as well.
We need a hashtag.
Yeah.
And then we can call it out more.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting, but I want to chime in with like a little bit of an alternative. Where I think you said like money is the most important thing, which is true from like a corporation perspective. But one of the things I like to use as a comparison to like ADHD and sort of I think we could all agree that like, you know, free, easily accessible treatment and diagnoses of ADHD would save, you know, nations of the world money in the long run. I think we can all agree on that. But there's other things that are like that. So like houselessness, for example, is one of those things. We have very, very strong evidence that the best way to get someone from living off the street into a house is to just give them a house. That is, we know that's the best way. It's been proven, and we know that would save money. Like it would be cheaper to do that, to give people houses, than it would be to keep doing what we're doing now, which is in I don't know, UK, US, Canada, Australia, all that, nothing basically. I think it is just the same thing. The reason why we're not housing houseless people is not because of money, because we know it would save us money to do so. It's because of the societal stigma. There's the same thing that we as ADHD people hear, that lazy, you know, you deserve it. Somehow there's something inherently wrong with you. So for me, I think there's a money side of it, definitely, but there's also like a strong empathy component to solving this. And I think awareness and more people getting diagnosed, to me, is the key. So that's why I'm really focused on like awareness and education, rather than trying to sort of like get at it from like the like depths of capitalism. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like it's almost it's both is what I'm trying to say, and maybe
totally
I said it in a
totally
way
agree.
that didn't portray that. I get tripped up in my words, but anyway, like, you know, showing smaller businesses the reasons that we're doing this is a way to break that stigma and show people that there are, you know, there are reasons that we do this, not just to be sensitive, but to like be better people and be better at what we're doing. And also in general, like when we're talking about the bottom line, if we're going to get into that stuff, right? Like you don't have as many people that are unhappy with your product and giving bad reviews because of whatever. You don't have as many people that are giving returns on your product or calling customer service because they were charged when they shouldn't have been charged. There is like actually a very big benefit for companies to employ these kinds of things and to inform their staff on the reasons that they're doing this, that help with the destigmatization in general, I think. But again, like, of course, I think that we need to you know, make mental health a bigger priority in general, but I don't see as corporations being the ones. That's not, I don't think, the way to get to them, you know, like we all have to find the different ways to get to the different people. right?
Yeah, definitely.
I personally think it's physicians and primary care physicians, because they only get 20 minutes of training in med school on ADHD, and educators. Those are the people.
It's like none in the UK.
Really?
Like
I wouldn't be surprised.
That's ridiculous.
In the Midwest, I've heard so many people say they said I was too smart.
Oh my God,
I'm going
that
through
is
that
so
right
ridiculous.
now.
It's a disgrace.
But everything you read says that we have higher IQ when we have ADHD, so it makes no sense.
Right.
They just don't know. They just don't know the science. The science is there. They just don't know. That's the thing.
Or care.
I thought, just going back to the mental health issue, I'm studying a master's in applied neuroscience here in London at the moment, very part-time. And our first subject was mental health in the community, and I could not have been more relevant to my lived experience. And essentially, the thinking within academia is, first of all, there's a lot of questions over whether schizophrenia is real or has been a tool of oppression that's just been accepted. Is there biology behind it? I'm writing an essay on it right now, so I'll fill you all in this week. And then there's also, but the discussion is basically an ill society produces ill people. Being mentally unwell is not necessarily a biology, it's just the life you're living. And if you could live a better life, then you could have better mental health. And I think really we can't just, because I actually don't know if ADHD people were allowed to just, do our thing, would we need
Go back to
medication?
hunter-gatherer. I mean, and that most Native Americans are ADHD, you see that that's not the case. It's a gene. It was once in demand. Now it's not.
Yeah. I think as well, I've had a lot of chats with a friend about this who is Jewish, and Israel has the highest percentage of ADHD people internationally. I think there's a lot of it in Ireland. I don't think it's diagnosed anywhere near as close to as it should be. But you can see it in populations when you go places. And I think that if you're surviving, if you live in a traumatized population, Ireland had 800 years of oppression, we had a brutal famine, and I think the toolkit that you have as an ADHD person, really you are more likely to survive. You're likely to escape because you'll see something, you're likely to be able to be creative about finding food or whatever it is, you're way more likely to survive. And so I think the gene has been preserved in oppressed populations.
So I want to get to Kirk and Leo also on this. What do we do?
Education.
So, yeah, I think education is a big key. And I do agree a lot with Grace on talking about like marketing campaigns and things like that, because I think we are approaching a new age of kind of capitalism, as it were. It's that there's a lot more benefit, I think, into doing things like the trauma-informed marketing. I think is great, because what companies are starting to see is that it's much less about making like the short-term buck now, like it used to be. That used to be the focus, right? But now companies are seeing the benefit into thinking long-term relationships. They're not trying to just make that money off the client. They're really trying to develop that relationship over time and deliver that value. So ultimately, I think that the companies that are focused on benefiting their customers long-term are going to be the ones who win out anyway, just because, they're building that long-term relationship.
That's also because the purchasing trend of younger generations is pointing in that direction.
Exactly. And a lot of that is because, I think that it's a lot easier with the internet and a lot easier, for people to start understanding how that was happening. And before, this was kind of all happening behind closed doors. People didn't see what, was really going on. But now, and I think this has been a huge thing for like figuring out ADHD to the extent that we have, because it's a whole bunch of us coming together and saying like, wait, we have all these shared experiences. And so, all of this stuff coming to light is really, I think, pushing the conversation the way we want it to go. So I think, continuing to do that and continuing to like put pressure on places with in terms of education, in terms of like showing what marketing works. We need to prove that these mechanisms work, and because once we do, they'll start to gain traction, and other people will start adopting them, and we're going to see that we're going to see the stigmas fade away. We're going to see the trend shift. So it's really just about continuing to bring light to it, continuing to share our experiences, and then I heard earlier, like, strength in numbers is huge for us, because we can inform the medical community, which is something I've been watching that's absolutely staggering, is the sense that, like, we're better able to give the data to the medical community, because, like, we're the ones who are looking at this through lived experiences. And so by being able to, like, show that in numbers, eventually people can't ignore us anymore. And that's really ultimately what it's going to come down to, is like, either they're going to change, or we're just going to, like, do our own thing and make it better ourselves and make them obsolete. And I think that's really what's going to eventually happen. Either they're going to change, or we're just going to change it for them.
I think another part of this that's interesting that we've all sort of touched on is education. I have a coworker who would be spectacular in this group, by the way. She has ADHD. She's picking up a psych degree right now. We were talking about this earlier today, that a lot of psychology, like, undergrad degree is a lot of theoretical, and a lot of, like, almost nothing's about practice. And if you look at a nursing student undergrad, it is all about practice. You can have someone spend 4 years in a psychology degree and come out and have no idea what ADHD looks like in real life. No idea. Yeah, I went to school for psychology, and we didn't talk about practice. We didn't talk about working with people. We didn't talk about patients, or you start to touch on, like, research 3-4 years in, where if it's a physical ailment, like, those nursing students are learning year one. Our education system for mental illnesses is so far behind. You get into those intro courses, and they're talking about, you're talking about, people in history who were wrong, but had the right idea of thinking. You're like Freud, you have, like, these are a lot of, conceptually great ideas, but that's what those students are learning. It's all conceptual. It's all, this was an interesting way of thinking, as opposed to, here's what it looks like in real life. So education is really, really far behind. Yeah. And this is, and having ADHD, we're not great at advocating for ourselves. We're not great at taking our own meds in the morning sometimes. So for us to, like, have all those other steps to get to the point where we need to catch education up amongst the list of the other things that we've just talked about is going to take a pretty spectacular group effort when it comes to advocacy for ourselves. And groups like this is a perfect example of what we can be doing, and is a really, really good starting point towards advocating to much, much larger changes.
And some, or actually quite a lot, of those people who go to 4 or 5 years or whatever it is of psychology studies, they, until pretty recently, only learned about the stereotypical ADHD, where if you're good in school, well, like my parents' example, are being asked the DIVA questionnaire, right? For those who know what that is, it's basically, what were you like in impulsivity, in ability to focus, and a couple other things, like areas, right? And what if you were really good in school? What if you loved to learn like I did? And what if you didn't feel the stereotypical things, but all the hyperactivity was there? It's just that it wasn't visible. We were talking about visibility here earlier. A lot of these things are invisible in many, many people. They're not learning about that. They have no clue, I'm not saying that everybody has no clue, I've seen some people really, really good people in the psychology, but a lot of people don't learn it. And that's a big problem.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that like it's been brought up a few times even in this meeting. People brought up, you know, you've been diagnosed with anxiety, depression, other things well before ADHD diagnosis. So we're often people who have spent a lot of time trying to figure out what's wrong, what's happening. We know that something isn't like, we're not like everyone else, so why? For me, looking back on how I was as a child, how I was when I first went to try and get mental health help, and was diagnosed with anxiety and depression that I now know are largely caused by untreated ADHD, because I'm mostly free of those now. I wanted to get to the point where someone would have recognized my, at least, like, I know not every case of ADHD is like super like, you know, presenting in a way that's recognizable. I know that. I know it's more complicated, but in my case, and I think in many other people's cases, I presented many signs, and it was never mentioned once to me. I found out I had it from my brother getting diagnosed, and him, like a couple years ago, and him describing his symptoms to me, and I thought ADHD was just like hyperactive little boys. Like, I feel like it would have been quite easy to recognize, you know. In my case, I want to get to the point where there's at least some baseline level of education in doctors, in I think teachers as well, yeah, where they can see what's happening, rather than what happened to me and what I suspect happened to many of you and many people listening or watching this, where your teachers maybe were like, oh, if you just tried harder, or what's going on, you're smart, but are you just lazy? Like, those are just like very classic signs that maybe it should be looked into. And that for me, I'm like, I just wanted to get there. That's like,
people don't think ADHD people are perfectionists, but a lot of us are.
Oh my God,
you know?
yeah. So many.
Yeah, I mean, I very similar experience to everything you've described, and all it would take is a half-day session for teachers and a half-day session for a nurse practitioner in a practice to know. I mean, I see people in the supermarket who have ADHD. I'm sure you guys can too. It's like I see ADHD people that everywhere, and I'm just like, I'm such a classic case, but I am very smart, and I did really well in school, and I have a master's already, and I'm doing another master's, and I already have another master's I want to do, because that's what I love. Yeah, that's what I love, and I love learning. So I was told by my GP, absolutely no way you could have ADHD. In the end, she made me go home and write her a letter. Now, luckily, I'm a writer, but for a lot of ADHD people, that'd be hard. And then when she realized my brother had died by suicide, she took me seriously, because she was like, oh, suicide in the ADHD community is very high. And I was like, you know, it shouldn't have to get there. You know, what if I had no siblings? You know, what if, you know, what if nothing like that had happened? What if everyone had just managed to scrape through? But I have dyspraxia and a whole bunch of other comorbids. And in my dyspraxia assessment, they said, I know the term twice exceptional is not used that much anymore, but they said, you know, as a twice exceptional person, Niamh has managed to do well, but at huge cost in her personal life. And that's it. It has huge costs in my personal life. And like the whole way through. And still, I'm still trying to sort my flat out, and I'm still trying to sort everything out, and I'm still trying to sort my bills out. And, you know, it's like, and I'm medicated, and it's still really, really hard. But I think for me, what I realized is like, why am I trying to be neurotypical? I'll never be neurotypical. I've just got to lean into being me and just, you know, let that be it, because I also don't want to be neurotypical. I don't want to be. Yeah.
Totally agree with all of that.
So, Dorsey, what do we do? I love that, by the way. That was awesome.
We talk more. We talk more, just like what you're doing. We find our advocates, and we help them get the information that they need to be able to talk more about it.
So I have an idea. If I could chime in just for a second. What about confidence?
In what way?
As being maybe the number one thing involved in getting the help that you need.
I think
you take one. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
it's okay, but I just think that really depends on your nurture. It's not a nature thing; it's a nurture thing, and.
But everybody's good at something.
Yeah.
Don't you? I mean, everyone on earth is good at something. And if you can find what that person is really, really good at and harp on it and tell them you are awesome because of this, they're more likely to go up to that teacher and say, I need help now. And it is their job to help.
They're interested in learning.
Well, right. But if they need help, we've got to have the confidence to say, I need help.
We do, but that is a nurture issue. Like, I've read so much about how if an ADHD child has just one supportive adult in their life, they'll thrive. But
Exactly.
Children are surrounded by negativity and shaming, and that
exactly
away at us inside. And you know, I'm very extrovert. I'm also very introvert because I'm a combination. But and I can absolutely advocate for myself now. But before diagnosis, I was a lot more vulnerable because I'd been through such a dark period of really traumatic mental health issues that were largely ignored. And even when I was trying to get, while I was on the waiting list I'm still on the waiting list to be seen by the end.
That's amazing.
Run for a long time. It could be another 2 years. It's been 2 years already. I lost my thread, but
I think education brings confidence because then you understand your mind and you stop blaming yourself internally. You stop that spiral and you seek help.
I agree. In short, I agree with everything that all of you have said. Okay. All of it. I don't disagree with a single one of you on anything, to be honest with you. The problem is that going after, the people that are never going to care, the big corporations or the education, just put more money at it. Well, where's the money? Like all of those things don't matter if the kid sits there and doesn't say, I need help. Because I feel like if the kid says, I need help over and over and over, eventually they're going to get something.
It's very dependent on where they're in school.
I'm sorry, but I was that kid that asked over and over and over and over and over again for help and never got it until I was in my 30s.
But you eventually got it.
But what about kids growing up in trauma? What about kids growing up in trauma who don't have support? That's a lot of children.
Well, that's kind of what we're doing.
Media coverage.
That's what we're doing now. But that's what we're doing now.
Yeah, definitely. But it needs to happen more and more.
Right, exactly. So I know, and that's what I'm desperately trying to convey is that it doesn't matter. Everyone has been through a lot, but if you can give someone confidence, the likelihood that they will end up better because they're willing to sometimes forcefully ask for help matters. But they've got to be confident in themselves to do that.
I do think that is from a position of privilege, though. I do, because a lot of people are battling trauma. And the most important thing is to tell them everything you're experiencing is okay and normal.
Right, which could instill confidence in them by saying that.
Oh, absolutely.
It doesn't have to be that I know I speak like, oh, it's got to be like this. No, I'm just saying, talk to them. There's no straightforward with ADHD. That's what we know.
Life.
Okay, there is no straightforward with any of this. There's no set way to do things. My opinion is I think it's a confidence issue. That is my opinion. It can be disagreed with. It doesn't matter. That's why we're having these conversations.
So in that case, like, I'm willing to go down that path. I am. I guess in that case, it's like, what builds confidence? Like, what maybe we can talk about for us, like what helped build our
community
around
the community you're around.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Totally agree.
Oh, finding your ADHD community is a game changer. Like, it's just
lecture ADHD is an ADHD community open to you all.
I can say how I can say how the community brought me to go, I gotta talk to my GP, y'all, because this is really hitting home. I sat there, I think I told on the individual episode that I was on, how I was sitting there listening to someone live stream on Twitch, and they were talking about being neurodiverse, two people with ADHD. And they were sitting there talking about their challenges, and I sat there going, check, check. Yes, no, yes, check, check, check. Down the list for 45 minutes. Community is powerful, y'all.
Yeah.
That's how I went, okay, I got to go talk to my GP, who then listened to me because I listed it all down, wrote it down.
Community is
that's how I
powerful
got
because we
help.
pump each other up.
Yeah.
If we could provide our community with more tools to bring education to their communities, I think that would be really key.
And I also think community, like even so we're living in this imperfect world. It's very unlikely that, you know, these things are going to change in a big way in the next few years or longer. So for me, like, community is amazing for existing in that world where at the very least we can find people that are like us, like people that are like relating to our struggles, where most people are like, you can't get the dishes done, what's wrong with you? Like, you talk to this group, will be like, yeah, of course, like, you do you. So it's just like, for me, it's what you said. It's like it's the positivity, it's self-acceptance, it's all the personal struggles. When you have a community, you can do that. If you're on your own, you don't know what's going on, you're blaming yourself, you're thinking there's something
negative,
terribly wrong with
depression.
you. Absolutely. So community on a personal level, I think, is, I don't know, for me it's like the most accessible in terms of like, we can make it happen now thing.
We need to start an AA for ADHD people, and it needs to be in every town.
No, Shannon, I was going to say, I agree with that so much, what you just said in terms of the community, that, you know, aspect of it, and the positivity, you know, aspect of it. I kind of look at it like, if I was the head coach of a team and I walked in and said, y'all suck, I don't think we have a chance in this game.
Yeah.
We're going to lose. But even if we're not as talented, or some people don't think they're as talented, what is a coach's job?
Well,
To motivate them to win the game.
Can I say that if you had met me 5 years ago, I wouldn't have talked. I wouldn't have talked because I didn't have this confidence. Medication gave me that.
Okay.
And
that's what worked for you, was the medication. I am the exact same way. The medication gives me the ability to be myself. That's what medication does for me, is I get to choose.
So it's education about medication.
There you go.
There's this amazing pharmacologist on TikTok. You should have her on.
Recommend her. She can come on. Anyone's welcome.
Can we share all these links, or can you guys share all these links? I need to get on TikTok, clearly. I've been kind of afraid because I get obsessed with all the rabbit holes.
You would be so awesome on TikTok.
I
would love it.
I don't get enough sleep as it is because I
don't go on TikTok.
I talked about poop.
No, but I mean,
we don't talk about.
All of our medications are wearing off now, but I think
they're gone out.
But Shannon, that does make so much sense, is the community aspect, you know, of this, and the coaching aspect of this. When people are going through a rough time and they're not as confident yet in themselves, the job is, as confident people, is to motivate them to be confident, to go out and do well.
I wasn't paying attention at all.
No matter who it is.
I was paying attention. So I agree, and I think I've been reading a lot of human potential psychology over the last year, and stuff all around that, and about how every human being is someone with enormous potential, and we all have our struggles, but, you know, we just need to remember that and remind each other, I think, is key. That we can, you know, we all have something in us that we really desire to do, and we have to go for it, you know. A lot of us have taken our way, but we can always make the time. We're always telling ourselves, oh, we can't do that, we can't do that, we can't do that. You know, but we can, we should. And so, you know,
we have so many self-beliefs that aren't even from us, that block us.
Right.
We don't even know. But if everybody could just realize you create your present and you have the power to direct yourself, and really believe that. You can't just say it. You got to believe it.
Right. You exactly.
It's so much easier said than done, though. I have to
Oh,
say.
it is. Oh, no, it's the hardest thing in the world for anyone, neurotypical or not. Neurotypical or not, being confident in what you say and actually believe what you're saying is very hard to do.
Meditation is the only way I got there, and I could only do it in a bathtub, and I'll yell that to the mountaintops because I think that that's because I'm ADHD and have sensitivities. The water helped so much.
I can't bear baths. I hate them. I've been living here for 8 years and I've never been in the bath once.
All right, we have almost been going on for 2 hours, so we're going to wrap this up real quick.
I'm so
No, we're good. I'm going to start up here with Dorsey, and this is how every single one of these is going to end. Agree with it or not, don't give a shit. What have you done recently, Dorsey, that is awesome?
I'm on TikTok now, y'all, and it's
I
fun.
love it. I
I'm
saw
trying
one
to
of your
help
videos
people.
that was awesome about vitamin C. So true.
Yes.
So true.
People
Don't
need
take
to
your
understand,
medication with
don't
vitamin
take your
C.
medication. Yep. 'cause
Ever.
It messes with
It
it.
doesn't work. So, anyways, blushing.
Oh wow. I was not prepared for that one. I have stood up for myself and decided that if I hear we can't help or do a proper assessment without your parents remembering things from your childhood or without school records, I'm not going to accept it.
They don't need that. I got mine without it. They don't.
I
need
know. I've spoken to multiple others,
Ridiculous.
and they had no parents alive or anything. So that's why I'm standing up for myself. If
That's
that
what I'm
is
talking
the
about. I love
result
it.
of talks with my parents.
We'll all call them and vouch
Good
for
for
you
you.
and complain.
Kirk.
I'm actually looking into going back to school. Just found out my job will pay for the whole thing. Yeah, so I have that opportunity. I'm looking into that, and now because I've said it in a very public space, I can't not do it.
That's Leo's mantra right there. Say it in a public space and you'll do it. I love. Well, that's awesome, Kirk. Congratulations. A lot of people are going back to school. Grace.
I got to exercise for the first time
Yes!
in weeks
Yes!
yesterday because I'm finally healed from my surgery. So
How do you feel about that?
so good. Oh my goodness. So for those of you that don't know, I had a breast reduction and it was quite a lot that they took off. And so I was able to like do jumping jacks and run and like do more things with my body that
That's awesome.
I was not able, literally just not able to do before without a lot of different emotions, let alone the physicalness of it. So it's good. It's really good.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
Thanks.
Shannon.
I guess I'm gonna have like self promo a little bit.
Good.
'Cause I just started Twitch streaming this week, which is very exciting for me because I have been using it. Like I've been watching Twitch, doing like there's lots of people who do like co-working streams, and I've been doing that as a work from home person for years. And so I finally decided to try it for myself and see if it would help me focus and get things done. And so far, so good. Like it's actually working really well. So I'm super pumped about it. If anyone is on Twitch, it's ADHD Designer. I just said it the same as my Twitter, just to keep things simple. So I'll be on there doing co-working streams, which is basically just me like working on client stuff and side projects. And then also in the future, I'm hoping to do like more community related stuff, like interviews and sort of more discussion type stuff. But for now, it's just starting sort of me doing it during my workday. So yeah, I'm
Let's
super
talk
stoked
in the
about that.
future,
Awesome.
Shannon.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do something.
Awesome. Neuve, what are you proud
Oh,
of?
me. So I've had a really big week actually, because like I said, I had a very rough few years going up to the diagnosis. But last week, so I had a book that I published last December, and I was on Breakfast TV last Sunday promoting it in front of 500,000 people.
Holy shit.
But the next day, that was the day after I started a new street food stall the night before, and I did all of it on about 6 hours sleep over 3 days. I did sleep for days later a lot, as much as I could. But yeah, it was really great because I just remembered what I love and what I'm good at and what I enjoy. And I'd forgotten, like I'd kind of lost faith in myself. So yeah, it felt really good.
Good for you. That's awesome. Leo, bring us home.
All right. So, so first of all, I launched my new SaaS platform. So it's a CRM for Twitter users. I've gotten the first few signups on there. So I'm pretty excited that I actually got that launched. That was something that I managed to like work over the course of several weeks to actually build it, which was wonderful. And then I'm in the process of teaching my first cohort of my automation principles course, and it's actually gone pretty well, even though I feel completely unprepared for most of it because I'm doing like a million different things. But ultimately, trusting in myself as knowing what I'm teaching has really worked out for me. So people seem to really be enjoying the course so far. And like actually, I've been running like a test cohort in parallel with like the real cohort with some people that I did a course creator fellowship with. And so instead of like, we scheduled it for an hour and it like went to almost 2 because we just, we were talking about stuff. So it's like, I went from kind of like, oh, I'm unprepared, like this is never going to last a full hour, to, okay, now we need to start thinking about scheduling more time. So yeah, it's been a fun few weeks.
That's awesome. So number one priority, what I'm the most proud of is this. Obviously, I am like humbled that I've gotten to meet all of y'all. And while we don't necessarily agree on everything, it doesn't matter, because we're all bringing so many different ideas to the table that other people are listening to and hearing that might help them. That this is awesome. I mean, I'm really proud of this recently. So that's number one. Number two is my dad, as an 81-year-old, went swimming in the ocean the other day with his bifocal sunglasses that are really expensive because he has a heavy prescription, and they fell off his face and sank to the bottom of the ocean. He comes to the beach and says, Lobow, go find these. I'll give you half the cost of the glasses if you can find them in under 10 minutes. I am proud to say that it took me 3.5 minutes to find those sunglasses in the ocean.
That's shocking.
That's
wow.
Literally,
how?
No one with ADHD could have done that.
I saw the way. Well, see, but that's the thing, is that he knew that I would drown, and before I would not find them.
Yeah.
Like I told him, I said, you're going to be dead and gone, and I'm going to be out here searching. So you know what you've just done, right? Like by doing that. But
miracle right there.
Well, it's total miracle. I took some flippers and went down and just kind of spread the sand over, and they had sunk right where he was standing. I mean, like a lead weight. But yeah, so ADHD had flippers on the hands, not the feet, and was going down at the bottom of the ocean doing this to find sunglasses. So yes, I'm proud.
Innovation.
I am proud of that.
I think we all recognize that. We would have put the flippers who knows where, but it wouldn't have been on our feet.
Right. I love that. And that is how we will conclude it. Y'all have a great one.